The power grid fails at 3:47 in the afternoon on a Tuesday in August. The air conditioning dies mid-cycle. Traffic lights go dark across 12 states simultaneously. Within 90 minutes, gas stations can no longer pump fuel. ATMs become useless slabs of metal. Refrigerated medications begin their slow climb toward room temperature. Most people assume this is temporary. They wait for someone to fix it. But the systems engineer who designed the regional distribution network knows something the public does not. Modern electrical grids operate on a principle called synchronized frequency regulation. When multiple substations drop offline within a critical time window, the remaining infrastructure cannot absorb the load redistribution. It cascades. The failure becomes self-reinforcing, and the timeline to restore basic services does not unfold in hours, it unfolds in weeks or months. This is not speculation, this is engineering reality, and the first 48 hours after recognition of systemic collapse will determine whether you survive the transition or become another casualty of unpreparedness. The concept of total collapse remains deeply misunderstood by the majority of the population. People envision apocalyptic movie scenarios with empty streets in abandoned cities, but real systemic failure looks nothing like Hollywood's version. It begins with small disruptions that seem manageable, a temporary inconvenience. Then, the secondary effects emerge. Hospitals lose backup generator fuel within 72 hours. Water treatment plants can no longer chlorinate supplies. Sewage systems fail because pump stations require electricity. Supply chains freeze completely because inventory management systems go offline and fuel becomes unavailable for logistics trucks. The average grocery store maintains only 3 days of inventory under normal conditions. When panic buying begins, those shelves empty in less than 8 hours. But the truly dangerous element is not the lack of food or water, it is the speed at which social cooperation breaks down once people realize the normal systems will not return quickly. The 48-hour protocol exists because neuroscience research shows a clear pattern in human response to disaster. For the first 12 to 18 hours after a major disruption, most people remain in a state of normalcy bias. They expect familiar patterns to resume. They wait for instructions from authorities. They believe someone else will handle the problem. This psychological paralysis is not weakness. It is a documented cognitive response to events that fall outside our reference experience. The brain literally struggles to process information that contradicts deeply embedded assumptions about how the world functions. But somewhere between hour 18 and hour 36, a shift occurs. People begin to recognize that the situation is not resolving. Anxiety transforms into fear. Fear motivates action. And when millions of people begin taking survival actions simultaneously without coordination, the system experiences its second major shock. The run on resources begins. Roads become impassable. Violence erupts at distribution points, and the window for calm, rational preparation closes permanently. The protocol itself is built on a principle borrowed from military emergency response doctrine. It is called strategic compression. You must complete in 48 hours what would normally take 2 weeks of careful planning. Every action must serve multiple functions. Every resource must be evaluated for its usefulness across different failure scenarios. The first priority is not food or water, despite what survival television programs suggest. The first priority is information dominance. You need to understand the scope and nature of the collapse before you can make intelligent decisions. Is this a regional power failure or a national grid collapse? Is this a cyber attack with potential military dimensions or a natural disaster with defined geographic boundaries? Is the government maintaining operational capability or has institutional authority broken down? These questions have vastly different answers, and each answer demands a different strategic response. Most people waste the critical first 12 hours trying to verify information through conventional channels. They check news websites that are no longer updating. They call emergency services that cannot respond. They wait for official announcements that may never come or may contain incomplete information. The intelligent approach is to build your own information network immediately. This means direct observation. Drive or walk through your area and document what you see. Are grocery stores still operating? Are banks open? Are police visible and responsive? Are gas stations functional? Are there signs of panic or civil unrest? This ground-level intelligence is worth more than any news report because it tells you the reality of your specific environment, and it allows you to move ahead of the reaction curve while others are still trying to understand what is happening. The second phase of the protocol addresses immediate resource acquisition, but not in the way most people imagine. The instinct is to rush to stores and buy everything possible. This approach fails for two reasons. First, you will encounter crowds of people with the same idea, and you will waste hours in lines or confrontations. Second, you will make poor purchasing decisions under stress and time pressure. The strategic approach is to focus on force multipliers. These are items that extend your capability across multiple domains. Water purification tablets or filters are force multipliers because they convert any water source into drinking water. A quality multiband radio is a force multiplier because it provides information access when all digital systems are down. A portable solar charging system is a force multiplier because it provides electrical independence. Medical supplies with broad application, like antibiotics, pain relievers, and wound care materials, are force multipliers because they address the most common health emergencies. You are not trying to buy everything. You are trying to acquire the specific tools that maximize your operational range and time horizon. The third element of the protocol is tactical relocation assessment. Most survival advice tells people to either bug in or bug out, as if these are simple binary choices, but the reality is far more complex. Your decision depends on multiple variables that are specific to your situation. Urban density matters. A high-rise apartment in a major city becomes a death trap within 1 week if water and sewage systems fail. But a suburban home with land access and lower population density offers more options. Proximity to critical infrastructure matters. If you live near a port, airport, military base, or major highway, you are more likely to see both government response and potential conflict. Resource availability matters. If you have no water source and no means to transport large quantities, staying in place is not viable beyond a few days. Threat environment matters. If you are observing early signs of civil breakdown, remaining in a high-density area increases your risk exposure exponentially. The calculus for relocation must happen fast, and it must be based on hard assessment rather than emotion. You need a pre-identified secondary location. This cannot be decided during the crisis. It must be planned in advance. The location should be far enough from urban centers to avoid refugee flows, but close enough to reach with the fuel you have available. It should have independent water access, either through wells, springs, or reliable surface water. It should have defensible positioning. This does not mean a fortress. It means natural terrain features that limit access points and provide observation advantages. And it should have at least minimal shelter infrastructure already in place. A family cabin, a rural property, or even a well-researched public land area with specific features can serve this function. But you must know the location intimately before the crisis begins. You must have maps that do not rely on GPS. You must have practiced the route, and you must have cached supplies there if possible. The psychological component of the 48-hour window is where most people fail catastrophically. Humans are social animals. We are neurologically wired to seek group consensus and cooperative action. This instinct serves us well under normal conditions, but during systemic collapse, it becomes a liability. The tendency is to gather with neighbors, discuss the situation endlessly, and wait for collective agreement before taking action. This process burns time and creates vulnerability. Worse, it often leads to groupthink and poor decision-making because the group defaults to the most optimistic interpretation of events. One person will say the power will return soon. Another will insist the government has everything under control. The group will rationalize inaction because action feels extreme or antisocial. Meanwhile, the clock is ticking, the window is closing, and the people who recognize the reality early and move decisively are already 3 steps ahead. The protocol demands that you operate independently during the first 48 hours. This does not mean abandoning community or refusing to help others. It means prioritizing your own survival preparation before extending assistance. The airline safety principle applies. Secure your own oxygen mask before helping others. If you deplete your resources or compromise your positioning trying to save everyone around you in the first 2 days, you will have nothing left to contribute when the situation stabilizes and real community building becomes possible. This is not selfishness. This is strategic thinking. You cannot help anyone if you become a casualty yourself. Water is the resource that most people underestimate in its complexity. The standard advice is to store 1 gallon per person per day, but this number reflects only drinking and minimal hygiene. It does not account for cooking, cleaning, or sanitation. It does not account for heat stress and summer conditions. It does not account for illness or injury that increases hydration needs. And it certainly does not account for the reality that municipal water systems may not just stop flowing, they may become contaminated. When water treatment plants lose power, chlorination stops, bacterial loads increase. When sewage systems back up due to pump failures, cross-contamination becomes a serious risk. Drinking untreated water from a tap that was safe yesterday can cause severe gastrointestinal illness within 48 hours, and in a collapsed system with no medical care available, that illness can be fatal. The solution is not to store thousands of gallons of water, which is impractical for most people. The solution is to have multiple methods of water purification and multiple potential sources identified in advance. Boiling works but requires fuel. Chemical treatment with bleach or iodine works but requires proper ratios and contact time. Filtration systems work but require maintenance and eventual replacement parts. UV sterilization works but requires power. The intelligent approach is to have at least 2 different methods available, and you must know where water exists in your environment. Natural sources like streams or ponds, commercial sources like swimming pools or water heaters, hidden sources like toilet tanks or hot water pipes. This knowledge must be in your head before the crisis, not something you scramble to figure out when you are already thirsty. Food presents a different challenge because the timeline operates on a gradient. You can survive weeks without food, but only days without water. However, the psychological and physical impact of hunger begins much faster than starvation. Within 72 hours of reduced caloric intake, cognitive function declines, decision-making becomes impaired, physical energy drops, mood destabilizes. These effects compound in a crisis environment where you need to be operating at peak capability. The protocol therefore emphasizes calorie-dense, shelf-stable foods that require minimal preparation. Peanut butter, nuts, dried fruits, canned meats, rice, beans, pasta, and energy bars. These items provide maximum nutrition per unit of weight and storage space. They do not require refrigeration, and most can be eaten with minimal cooking or no cooking at all. The goal is not gourmet meals. The goal is maintaining your operational capacity while you assess the larger situation and make strategic decisions. The security dimension of the 48-hour protocol is where most civilian thinking breaks down completely. People assume that law enforcement will maintain order. They assume that their neighbors will remain cooperative. They assume that violence is something that happens elsewhere to other people. But history shows a different pattern. When systems collapse, the veneer of civilization thins rapidly. Police cannot respond if they have no fuel for vehicles or if they are prioritizing their own families. Neighbors become competitors for scarce resources, and individuals who were law-abiding citizens under normal conditions may rationalize theft or violence when they believe their family's survival is at stake. This is not a moral judgment. This is observable human behavior under extreme stress. The protocol does not advocate for aggressive posturing or preemptive violence. It advocates for awareness and deterrence. You must appear less vulnerable than your neighbors. This means maintaining operational security. Do not advertise your preparations. Do not tell people what resources you have. Do not display supplies where they can be seen from outside. Keep lights minimal at night. Maintain a low profile. At the same time, you must project capability. A home that appears occupied and defended is less likely to be targeted than one that appears abandoned or weak. Simple measures like reinforcing entry points, maintaining visibility of your property, and having basic defensive tools available create deterrence. The goal is to make potential threats choose an easier target. You do not need to be a fortress, you just need to be harder to victimize than the next option. Communication infrastructure fails in predictable patterns during systemic collapse. Cell towers operate on battery backup for only 4 to 8 hours after power loss. After that, mobile phones become useless except as cameras or flashlights. Internet services fail even faster because the data centers and routing infrastructure require massive amounts of continuous power. Landline phones may work slightly longer if the central office has generator backup, but this is not guaranteed. Within 24 hours, most people will be operating in an information void. They will not know what is happening beyond their immediate visual range. They will not know if help is coming. They will not know the scale of the crisis. This uncertainty amplifies fear and poor decision-making. The protocol addresses this through old technology that remains functional when modern systems fail. Battery-powered or hand-cranked emergency radios can receive AM, FM, and weatherband broadcasts. These stations often remain operational longer because they have priority generator fuel and emergency protocols. Shortwave radios can receive international broadcasts, which may provide information that domestic sources do not. CB radios or ham radios allow for two-way communication with others in your area, creating a local information network. These tools are inexpensive and require minimal training, but they must be acquired and tested before the crisis. You cannot learn how to use a radio effectively when you are already under stress and time pressure. The medical dimension of collapse is particularly unforgiving. Hospitals become overwhelmed within hours during any major emergency, but during a total systemic collapse, they may stop functioning entirely. Staff cannot get to work if there is no fuel, equipment fails without power, medication supplies run out. Patients who require life support systems, like dialysis or ventilators, face immediate life-threatening situations. For the general population, this means that even minor injuries or illnesses can become serious problems. A simple laceration that would normally require a few stitches can become infected without proper treatment. A common illness like strep throat can progress to serious complications without antibiotics. A twisted ankle can become a mobility crisis if you need to walk long distances. The solution is to have a medical kit that goes far beyond basic first aid. You need wound closure supplies like sutures or surgical staples, not just bandages. You need broad-spectrum antibiotics, even though they technically require a prescription. You need pain management options beyond over-the-counter pills. You need tools for dealing with dental emergencies, which are common and extremely painful. You need reference materials that explain how to treat conditions when professional help is not available. And you need the knowledge to use these supplies effectively. A box of medical equipment is worthless if you do not know what to do with it. The time to learn basic medical skills is now, not when someone you care about is bleeding or feverish with no doctor available. The 48-hour protocol recognizes that preparation is not about accumulating supplies, it is about building capability. Supplies run out, capability persists. A person who knows how to purify water has an advantage over someone who has 100 gallons stored but no way to replenish them. A person who can navigate without GPS has an advantage over someone dependent on technology. A person who knows how to start a fire in wet conditions has an advantage over someone with 1,000 matches. The protocol therefore emphasizes skills as much as equipment, and the skills must be practiced regularly. Knowledge degrades without use, muscle memory fades. Confidence requires repetition. The final phase of the protocol involves network building, but only after your immediate survival needs are secured. Humans cannot survive long-term in isolation. We need cooperation, division of labor, and mutual defense. But the network must be built with people who share a similar level of preparation and mindset. Aligning with unprepared individuals during the first 48 hours creates liability. They will drain your resources. They will make demands. They may become hostile if you refuse to share everything you have. The strategic approach is to identify in advance who in your area has relevant skills and resources, who has medical training, who has mechanical skills, who has agricultural knowledge, who has military or law enforcement experience. These people represent potential alliance value, and the time to build those relationships is before the crisis, when there is no immediate pressure and you can assess character and capability honestly. The protocol ends at the 48-hour mark, not because the crisis ends, but because the nature of the challenge transforms. The immediate scramble for position and resources is over. The people who recognized reality early and moved decisively have established their initial foothold. The people who hesitated or denied the situation have burned through their window of opportunity. From this point forward, the focus shifts from emergency response to sustained operations. This means establishing routines, conserving resources, gathering intelligence, and building or joining community structures that can provide security and resource sharing. But none of this is possible if you do not survive the first 2 days. The psychological burden of accepting these realities is significant. Most people resist the idea that they need to think this way. They view preparation as paranoia or antisocial behavior. They trust that the systems will hold or that help will arrive. And in most situations, they are correct. Modern civilization is remarkably resilient, but resilience has limits. Systems designed for efficiency are not designed for redundancy. Supply chains optimized for cost reduction have no buffer capacity. Infrastructure maintained at minimal levels fails under stress, and when multiple failures cascade simultaneously, the recovery timeline extends beyond what most people can endure without preparation. The 48-hour protocol is not about living in fear. It is about acknowledging reality and taking responsibility for your own survival. Because when the systems fail, no one is coming to save you, and the decisions you make in the first 2 days will determine everything that follows.